You may be an entrepreneur, a business owner, and/or a marketing pro. If so, then you know the importance of a well-crafted strategic brand narrative. And if you truly dial in your compelling brand story, then you can be the category king. But you probably also know how exhausting creating a potent brand story is, because it takes weeks, even months, to do your research, your discovery, your soul searching, and creative development, and even then, you hope you got it right. What if you could reduce that time down to just a couple of days and create a badass brand that helps you profit from your particular expertise? Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story. Joining us today is Pia Silva, author of the new book, Badass Your Brand, The Impatient Entrepreneur's Guide to Turning Expertise into Profit. In addition to brand building, Pia shows owners of 1- and 2-person branding agencies how to use her rapid brand development process and how you can too for your own business. I've been branding companies for nearly 40 years, and I can tell you that it can be a long, expensive, and painful process because there are so many moving parts to get right. But the fastest brand development I ever did happened in about 20 minutes. You see, I was mentoring a number of startups at Seed Spot, an incubator in Phoenix, Arizona. It was an afternoon session where 6 of their mentees gave their pitches. Once their pitch was over, I'd coach them on storytelling techniques to make their story more clear, more concise, and of course, way more compelling. One of the founders, Dr. Stephanie Schull, took the stage in the room of about a dozen founders and their supporters. Stephanie shared her startup that focused on women's health, particularly their private parts. She introduced her Kegel Bell product to help, as she says, tens of millions of women who want and deserve to be great. At that time, and probably even now, I'm pretty naive about women's health issues in that area. So I had to ask Stephanie what a Kegel Bell was and how it worked. A snicker floated across the room, especially from the ladies looking at this poor, ignorant fella. She explained that Kegel exercises strengthen the pelvic floor muscles to create a host of health benefits, from bladder control to better sex. She created a collection of small weights to make the exercises more effective and called them Kegel Bells. This dumbbell finally understood. Once Stephanie explained the product, its use, and health outcomes women achieve by doing a Kegel Bell workout with their private parts, I said, "Oh, I get it." And then, to counter my embarrassment from having to be explained her problem-solution narrative, I half-jokingly said, "Stephanie, I've got the perfect name for your new product." "Oh yeah? What's that?" she asked. "Your new product is the Vagina Gym." And guess what? She loved it. She kept her Kegel Bell product name and added Vagina Gym as the workout. Look it up. It's a robust business, and the brand name came from both a moment of embarrassment and enlightenment, at least for me. And that, my friends, is the fastest brand I've ever created, the Vagina Gym, created right there on the spot, which isn't always easy to find. My guest hasn't heard this story because I always do my intros after my interviews. But having gotten to know Pia Silva, who runs an agency with the irreverent name of Worst of All Design, and who has a rapid way of creating badass brands, I have a hunch she's chuckling right now as she listens to this opening.
I find that when you make a really good case for the plan that you lay out, and then you make it a really simple process to execute, it's so hard to say no to that, because if you're reading along and you're nodding your head and you're going, "Yes, I want that. Yes, I see that. Yeah, I can imagine that." At the end, it's like, "Yes, you're going to do this for me? Great. Here you go. Whatever you want, I'll pay for it."
Pia is an entrepreneur, speaker, author, and coach to small branding agencies. She specializes in building badass brands without the BS. In 2021, she founded No B.S. Agency Mastery, a training program where she teaches 1 to 2 person branding agencies how to scale to $30,000 to $50,000 per month while reducing their workload by up to 80%, all without employees. Pia has delivered a popular TED Talk on cultivating true confidence. She is also the host of the top-ranked podcast, No B.S. Agency Podcast. And she's a former Forbes contributor and has been featured on MSNBC, Entrepreneur on Fire, and Entrepreneur Magazine, among other notable platforms. So, if you're ready to build a badass brand fast, Pia will explain how on this edition of The Business of Story. Good morning, Pia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Park.
And you are coming to us from?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn.
Born and raised.
Born and raised out there. So you've been in the middle of it, in the heart of international business since you were a little kid.
It's in my blood. What can I say?
Have you always been in the branding world?
No, I actually got into it accidentally because my boyfriend at the time, I guess, was a designer. And I said, you know what? This is like around 2008, 2009, really hard to get work around then. He was doing freelance work. And at a certain point I said, you know what? I think I could do this better than you. You're very
nice.
Creative. And I feel like I could get the clients and like kind of work around you, like build a business around your talent. And that's really how it started.
And that's how, back in 2008, 2009, right in the middle of Manhattan. I mean, with all of that going on, was still having a hard time landing business, as a lot of creatives do. You know, they're very good at creating things, but maybe not always the best at bringing in business and having the people skills you need to get through the tough times and that kind of thing. Sounds like that's what you brought to it.
Absolutely. I just kind of brought the New York hustle to his creativity, and I've been helping creatives ever since, like figure out the business part of it, figure out the marketing part of it, how to find, close, upsell clients, and then manage them.
Yeah. Now, you don't necessarily come from the branding world, but I was watching some of your videos online, and you talked about you had been exposed to a lot of branding from large agencies. And, you know, Pia, I've been in the branding world for almost 40 years. And I ran my own ad agency for 20 of those years in Phoenix, and my core specialty was branding. And I feel you. I can hear you and get it when you say, man, sometimes this branding thing just drags on and on and on, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And you find yourself looking at your client and realizing they're kind of overthinking this thing. So how did you bring your unique approach to rapid branding?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, especially because since I didn't come from the branding world, I learned about branding school of hard knocks, right? I first learned about it figuring out my own brand, figuring out how I was going to attract and close clients. I mean, I started by networking to find clients, and I had to figure out why they should hire me over anyone else. So that's where I actually learned branding on the job. And then our design agency turned into a branding agency because I said, well, this is where the real value is, right? It's not in the designs, it's in the whole strategy and the messaging, the stories, and then how that is applied to the design. So that's where I cut my teeth. And then I was doing what everybody around me was doing. So I was running our agency like all the people I was networking with. And that is I call it now the default model, but like the big agency model, right? The long timelines, the back and forth. Let me show you some work. Okay, I'll get your revisions a week later. Okay, give me feedback a week later. Okay, this goes on and on and on. And I found that it was very hard for us at the time we were a 4-person team to keep our head above water. Even when we were closing clients, the money was going out as quickly as it was coming in, and we couldn't get the projects to finish. So that ended up getting us in a bunch of debt and overworked, but still in debt, which is really a not fun place to be. And we had to let our employees go. And then it was back to just me and my husband, just the two of us trying to figure out how we were going to get out of this hole. And we decided, we had this little offering we had made on the side that we didn't even tell anybody about, this like 1-day intensive, just to bang some work out for people who couldn't afford our $30,000 packages. And at that moment, when we were in this hole, we said, that thing is actually pretty great. That thing is actually 1 day, $3,000. We're done. Like, maybe we should try going all in on that. And that completely changed everything. At the time I immediately went to all of these proposals that were open, that weren't getting back to us. I'm sure you've had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
Send the proposal. Hey, just checking in. Hey, we're still moving forward with this. I went back to them and I got them on the phone and I said, actually, these proposals are no longer valid. We're not working like this anymore. But if you'd like, I can do the same project in a 1-day intensive or a 2-day intensive, and it's a fraction of the price. And you better believe it, they all closed. And we did those projects. And I said, we're still the same people doing the work. We're just cutting out all the BS of the back and forth. You're basically going to pay us a lot less because you're just going to trust that we know what we're doing, and you're kind of going to take what we make. And they all said yes. And that was the beginning of what developed into the process that we do and teach today.
So take us to one of your very first intensive, and I would imagine you and your husband, or maybe as your boyfriend at the time, husband now,
My husband now. Yeah.
were kind of wondering, can we really pull this off in 1 day? Take us through the process very quickly with one of your first ones where you realized, we are onto something.
Yeah, one of the first ones was a company called Stash Wealth. They really wanted to hire us, and I had pitched them the $30,000 project with the huge, beautiful deck that was customized to them, and it was a lot of money for them at the time. And I came back to them, and our brand, our company was called Worst of All Design. It said "Badass Brands Without the BS" on the homepage. Very irreverent. They were really magnetically attracted to us and our brand.
Why did you call it Worst of All Design?
Well, because we're a branding agency and we thought that everybody out there says, we help you stand out, we're different, but they all say the same thing. And so instead of saying that, we're different. And we knew that would really magnetically attract the right people. And sure enough, plenty of people would say, a lot of my friends would say, well, shouldn't you be Best of All Design? And I'd say, well, you're just not our clients, because our clients would call us up and say, oh my God, I just love this. I love everything about this. So this was one of those clients. She really wanted to work with us. $30,000 was not in the budget for them. And so I went to them and I said, if you really trust us, we'll do this as a 2-day intensive for $5,000. And they said, absolutely. And at the time we did some prep work, and then we actually showed them work in the morning, got their feedback, and then Steve was building the site. Oh, and I was like, I had some copy, but we were like formalizing the copy and doing it on the fly in these 2 days to finish it up. And we launched it at the end of the day. That's how we did it initially. And it was somewhat stressful, but it worked. They loved it. Like, it launched at the end of day 2 and it was amazing. Over the years, as we sharpened our knife and perfected our process, we've actually come to a place where we build the entire brand ahead of time to completion. And then the 2 days is actually there just to bring the client on board. Yeah, there are small tweaks, but there really isn't much. And that allows us to actually do much more robust projects, like the same projects that we would charge for, that we would actually spend 6 months on. It's the same amount of deliverables. It's just delivered in an intensive way.
So within 2 days, you go into a brand, you don't know them other than some of the research or discovery you've done in presenting them. So you do homework in advance of these 2 days.
We actually do a first step process that we get paid for before we do these 2 days. So we do something, instead of proposals, we do something called, I call it a lead product. Our lead product is called the Brand Shrink. We sell that to anyone who's interested in working with us. So that is a 2-hour deep dive interview, get to know everything about the client. And then I deliver a written brief that basically says, you're here, you want to go there, this is what needs to happen for you to achieve those goals. And that plan is the basis for the project. So by doing that process, and you ran an ad agency for 20 years, so I'm sure you did all kinds of processes like this, probably more robust for bigger companies. But I find that doing that process not only makes it very clear to me what is involved in this project, so I can confidently say, yeah, like let me take over, let me do this
Mm-hmm.
for you. But it also builds an incredible amount of trust with the client. It makes them feel heard, it makes them feel seen, and that's why they trust us to go like
Yeah.
do the whole project without them, basically.
So that brand shrink, that 2 hour session you sit down, and I'm gonna, definitely come at you from a branding standpoint. So it sounds like that
Of
is
course.
more of a kind of a business model, tactic, market understanding, engagement of how you are going to go from here to there, which of course is a big part of the puzzle. The second piece of that, of course, is now tone, feel, look, that kind of thing that is really going to not only capture their authentic voice, but differentiate them in the market. Does that then come in your 2 day intensive?
Yeah. So we describe and figure out the strategy of what that brand look, feel, voice, all of that is in that initial brief. And when the client signs off on it and we decide we're going to move to step 2, which is this intensive, I already know the direction it's going to be in. So then I am able to develop the message, write all of the copy. We're able to design and build the website and all of the identity materials, sometimes marketing materials, whatever this project involves. It's usually all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
The specifics might be a little different depending on the client, but we are able to take it to completion based on that deep dive that we did. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
know that some of your listeners are at like very large companies or like CMOs at big companies, and they're probably going, there's no way that you could do that with all the stakeholders, which I agree. But we have only always worked with 1 to 3 person service businesses because we know that niche so well and because we limit the stakeholders. However, I have trained lots of people to take the principles of this and bring it into big companies and still make it work. Might not be 2 days, but it might take something that usually takes 6 months or a year and shrink it down to a month. So to me, it's all about just how can we make this more efficient, more profitable, get rid of the BS that is sucking up all of our time and energy, and just spend our time mostly focused on the valuable work that we're getting
Mm-hmm.
paid for.
And you've got that clientele of, you said, 1 to 3 people. So you're dealing directly with the decision makers. They can
Yeah.
say, let's go. Given how rapid it is, Pia, have you ever had one blow up? Like, oh, we didn't get this right because we didn't take the time to really understand. And I'm not talking, weeks and months of time. I'm taking talking a few more days of really getting it right.
The only time it ever blew up on us was, and I learned a big lesson here, was when the person that hired us and paid us was not the actual core decision maker. And I somehow missed that in like the communications, because usually the person that finds you, hires you, and pays you is the decision maker.
Right.
And so like it was only about halfway through the first day that it became clear that the new person that came in was actually the decision maker. Also, their relationship, like the person who was the decision maker
Mm-hmm.
was younger, seemed less seasoned, the whole thing. Like when I finally realized it, I went, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this. So we didn't get the buy-in from the person we needed to get the buy-in from. And so we just had to switch gears and we just spent a little more time on that project. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I always tell my students that I teach this to too. It's not like you can't ever fix it. The worst thing that can happen is you spend more time than you had planned. But
Mm-hmm.
it's always fixable and you're always able to eventually figure it out. But, sometimes that was so long ago. And once I had that experience, I got to put new steps in place to make sure that never happened again.
Yeah. And how do you measure the success of one of your branding endeavors?
That the client got what they wanted and were happy, and they have a brand that can support them in selling, usually at higher prices. That's usually it. Is the brand communicating better? Is it more clearly? Are they able to charge more? Are they able to sell more easily? That's like our criteria.
Okay. Can you give us an example of a brand you did from start to finish?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll do Stash Wealth because we're actually 10 years later rebranding it now that they have 10 years in. So good example. At the time, they were Merrill Lynch clients. I'm sorry, Merrill Lynch previously worked at Merrill Lynch, and they went off on their own. They wanted to make financial services available to millennials. So this is 10 years ago. So it was like people in their 30s. And they had a different way of talking. They wanted to make it available to people who didn't have $500,000 in, managed assets. And so they came to us and they had this very Merrill Lynch looking, like blue and gray and stock photos of the bull on Wall Street. I mean, all the things, but they had this like slightly irreverent tone in their copy. So the rebrand was it was half getting them on board and saying, you need to really embrace the fact that you are different. You can't say, we're different, we're for this younger generation, and then kind of still look like the financial services world. At the time, we put get your financial shit together as the headline of their brand. I remember distinctly one of her mentors from Merrill Lynch said, you can't say that in financial services firms. And it was a lot of me, just reminding her, like, this is why you're going to make a splash. And she ended up getting tons of press and a lot of, it's funny because now that we're rebranding it, like looking 10 years out, at the time, it was so contrarian and it was so different. And she really got so much attention because it was so different and was speaking to a generation of people that didn't feel spoken to in the financial services firm. Now, here we are 10 years later, rebranding because that irreverent tone is no longer as irreverent because everybody is doing that now. And so also millennials are now aging out. They're starting to become the older generation compared to who she's working with. So we're like repositioning, we're remessaging, we're taking out the in-your-face bold messaging and replacing it with a more bold approach and attitude, but with a little bit less of the
contrarian sort of.
Like not the in-your-face was so good at the time. And I've just been telling her now, it's like, it's not that we don't still have that boldness. It's just we have to evolve because the market has evolved. When I said badass the first time in 2013, people would tell me, you can't say that in a speech at the Chamber of Commerce. And now, that's even sounds ridiculous now, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, we've got our presidential running mates and all they do is drop F-bombs right and left.
Don't even. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you have to evolve with the times. It was different then and now different is something different. And,
are they appealing to Gen Z now? And is that a different mentality or?
The mentality is changing, but also it's about, for the long haul, it's really about financial services for 30 somethings, right? And talking about the unique things that happen in your 30s, how it's a time of growth. It is a time of a lot of changes that do set you up for certain directions in life. Are you going to buy a house? Are you going to have a child? You're going to have 2 children, like you're making big career moves and really speaking to the nuances of those 30 somethings. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm with you on the rapid pace of doing this. And in this day and age, too, it seems like the market kind of demands it, too.
I agree.
Again, I've built hundreds of brands. And it went from the old days of, if your brand was a dog, what kind of dog would it be? And if your brand was a magazine, what kind of kind of that bullshit. And when I was a young man in the branding world and taught that approach, I just thought, that doesn't make any sense. But okay, I've got to listen to my bosses. And we would go in and do that. And we would get this feedback that, like, now what are we supposed to do with this? It was always very confusing. And it's when I started studying story and the hero's journey and that sort of thing that I created the story cycle system, which is inspired by the hero's journey, but it is a 10-step process that takes you through a brand, to develop that brand story strategy, brand narrative strategy. And it's very effective. I mean, for me, Pia, it was first just an experiment to see if I could actually make this work. And the very first brand we did it on, Clinica Adelante, rebranded them Adelante Healthcare, and they grew by 600%. And they will say it was precisely because we got our brand story pulled together. But it took us 4 months to do that. Mm-hmm. And that was my experience, just the same exact experience good. You had, 4 to 6 months to get that brand dialed in, and yeah. you get exhausted. There's scope creep. And in this day and age when speed is everything, that I love what you're doing with it. The biggest caution I guess I have in my own mind is when does speed get in the way of accuracy?
Well, you have to think about who you're doing this speed for. So the speed it's not meant to be so that there's a shortcut. It's quite the opposite, actually. Like, generally, this process is best for working with very small businesses where you're working directly with the owner. I don't know how many of these smaller businesses you've worked with in this branding space, but they tend to get in their own way more than anything else. So half of the reason I have experienced this being so much more effective is because, well, I bring a pretty holistic understanding to the process, right? I help them with developing and creating their brand, but I understand what's going on in their business too. So I'm looking at it from a business perspective as well. Mm-hmm. And then because I'm often dealing with people who are not business people, but they are experts, they need this guidance more than anything. They need somebody to really take their hand and show them the way, and somebody that they trust, and they need to get out of their own way. And what I have found with small businesses specifically is that in these kinds of processes, they may feel like they have kind of like a more expert understanding than they do because they have eyes and have opinions. And I always try to tell them, your opinion is not really relevant here. We need to make decisions based on your goals and strategically what's going to get you to your goals. So if you ask your cousin what they think about this, I don't care what your cousin thinks about this unless your cousin is your ideal client. So there's a lot of like coaching involved in that. And for me, with these small businesses, I have found that the shortness actually helps them get out of their own way and get back to the thing they should be focusing on, which is marketing themselves, connecting with people, finding those clients, sharpening those skills. And they should leave it to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our process too, like I said, it's long and involved and complex. Yeah. We've been able to bring in AI, and I'm curious if you're using any AI. We have taken our 10-step story cycle system, created a custom chat GPT, and what normally would take 4 to 6 weeks of discovery and even brand positioning, you can do in less than an hour. You go in, you follow the prompts, you ask it the questions, and you don't have to be a brander to do it. You could just be a business owner, and then it provides you with your initial brand narrative strategy, your brand story strategy. Then it takes you as the human being, and this is really where the brander comes in, to sit down and say, okay, this is close, but we got to tweak this. This isn't quite right. Oh, I'd never thought of this. That's interesting. Let's move that up. Are you using AI in your process as well?
I love that you said that, because that last part that you just said is the part that I feel like so many people are missing. It's such a great tool to expedite the process, but if you don't have the critical thinking and strategic eye, then it can, and I coach people and watch them do this. Whatever the AI spits out, sometimes it reads well, so it kind of feels like, oh, that's the answer, and then I'll have to point out this actually isn't saying anything, or this is actually missing the big point of this brand. And I feel like when people start using things like that too early, before they've developed their own like strategic brand eye and curation eye, that it can actually really take them on the wrong path. So absolutely, I use it every day to shorten my processes. I love a good like brain dump into it and then like neaten this up. But I always tell it, but don't change my words unless you must for clarity. Like I don't want you summarizing and watering down what I'm saying. I want you to just help me get it, to the edited part faster. That's generally how I use it. And I do find when I have it like write me something and I don't look at it too critically, sometimes I'll go back and go, this is actually like, it sounds good, but it's actually not quite right. And it's really easy to just take it and say it's right. So I'm just very wary of that. And I'm always telling my students, like, don't ever just take what it gives you because that seems pretty good. Like really try to be discerning about what it spits out.
Yeah, we look at it as our story cycle system intern. Say you've got an intern right out of college and they are just learning the ropes, and you say, go out and do all this due diligence, bring it back to us, bring the discovery back to us, and then from what we know of the market and our experience and whatever, we will make it work for the customer and the client, get their input. But it's like any, if you think of any intern, they're probably not going to deliver you the perfect thing. You take that input, they've saved you a ton of time, so you don't have to do it yourself, and then you apply it to the work at hand.
I think an intern is a perfect metaphor for what AI should be, or how we should treat it. And I think it probably delivers things that look more fully fleshed out than an intern's deliverable. And that's what's tricky about it is you have to remember this might sound right, but this is intern level work. So let's just be careful.
Yeah. So in addition to doing branding work yourself, creating badass brands for 1, 2, 3 person shops out there, you're also teaching agencies, and you've got a very specific niche, a 1 to 2 person agency. You show them how to do this. They, I guess, pay you a fee. You show them your process, then they just go out and do it on their own?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, that's predominantly what I do now. I do a few branding projects a year just to stay sharp, and because like when they're perfect, I love to do it. But now I spend most of my time training other people on our specific model, because I do find that after I wrote my book, I didn't intend this, but after I wrote my book, I had lots of people who read my book that were exactly like us, like 1, 2 person branding agencies, contact me and said, I'd really like to learn how you run your business the way you do. That wasn't the intention of the book. So about 4 years ago, I decided this model, this process, something we've refined over many years, is really, really well suited for these very small agencies who don't want to build a big team. And I just find there is a whole world of people out there who love to do the branding, the design, the websites, the copy, the messaging. They love to do the whole thing. They love working with other business owners, entrepreneurs. A lot of them are really attracted to entrepreneurs who are purpose-driven, looking to make an impact, looking to work with other people who want to change the world. And they need a process to do this so that it's still profitable, so that they aren't just working all the time and not making enough money. It's the whole concept of, you got to put the mask on yourself before you put it on everyone else. So that's what I'm really trying to do, is help as many 1, 2 person branding agencies that are really good at what they do, but don't really understand or know the business part of it, get the business and process part so they can get back to doing predominantly what they love.
So you've got a blueprint. Can you walk us through that quickly?
Yeah. So the model is, there's really 3 phases. There's clients, intensives, and authority. So clients is all about, how do I shine to my ideal clients, right? How do I say something that makes my ideal clients magnetically attracted to me, seeing me as the best option for them? And then I teach them how to, instead of doing the free proposal, how to sell that first step as a way to very quickly build trust and authority. And also because that first step sets you up to be able to do an intensive. So it sets you up.
Pia, you're talking about agencies here, right? But if you think about what you're sharing here, if for any listener or viewer out there, if you've got a small business services practice, you can apply the same sort of thinking to your work. You don't have to be a branding agency.
You do not at all. And in fact, I used to coach and teach this to all service businesses. My book is called the Badass Your Brand, The Impatient Entrepreneur's Guide to Turning Expertise into Profit. So to me, this model of selling that lead product upfront works for anyone who is selling expertise, especially if you're selling really high level expertise that your consumer, that your clients would not really understand until they start working with you, which I find experts have a really hard time communicating the true value of the work that they're doing up front. Obviously, you and I both do this in content and
Hmm.
podcasts and all that. But before you have all of that, how do you communicate that to somebody that you're just speaking to and they're interested in your services? The lead product process, selling that first step. I find when people pay for it, I think that some people do this kind of for free in a proposal. It's not the same. When people pay for it, they value it, they respect the opinion more. I've given away so much free advice to people that they don't take. The second they pay for it, they see it totally
And
differently.
they have skin in the game.
They get skin in the game. Yeah,
Yep.
they've got 1 foot forward. So that's the client's piece, and that absolutely applies to all services.
And an example of that is like with you, when you go in and they pay for that first 2 hour download
Mhm.
intensive, and then you feed them something back. In essence, that's a little bit of it's a proposal. It's showing your work in action. They actually leave with something of value. You've already got a check from them, so it's paid for your time to do it, but now they're invested.
You've got it. Yep. And I really do emphasize that the brief itself, the plan, should be written not as a proposal. It is a strategic brief. It is here, you said you want this, do this, do this. Let me give you examples of how to do this. It's not about giving them kind of like a general idea and saying you got to pay me for the rest. It's saying no, no, no. This is what your brand voice should be in this direction. Use words like this and this. I mean, I tell them not. I don't suggest you ever actually do the work. You don't write copy. You don't show designs, but you do get granular enough that the client reading it can envision what you're talking about. You're bringing it to life. I tell my students, use metaphors, use specific examples. It's really a version of using story to bring this plan and this strategy to life in your client's eye, in their mind. I mean, so that, and then when you get to the end of it, it's like that works. That is a valuable piece of brief all on its own. And then after that, we say, oh, by the way, if you would like me to implement this for you, it's one number, it's a clear process, it will be done on this date. And I find that when you make a really good case for the plan that you lay out, and then you make it a really simple process to execute, it's so hard to say no to that, because if you're reading along and you're nodding your head and you're going, yes, I want that, yes, I see that, yeah, I can imagine that, at the end it's like, yes, you're going to do this for me, great. Here you go. Whatever you want, I'll pay for it.
And what do you charge typically, or recommend people charge for that first step?
I typically recommend between $500 and $1,000. I am looking for a no-brainer price here. And a no-brainer price is something that somebody who doesn't even have that much built up trust with you would be willing to pay. And that really depends on, your network, who you're talking to, your own comfort with price. Mine is now $10,000. So it's not that it has to be a certain price, but especially when I first teach this, I'm like, listen, this is you getting paid to pitch. It is the opportunity, to your point, even if they don't move forward, you got paid for your work. There was an exchange of value, and you're not as, takes the desperation out of the conversation, right? You don't feel
Mm-hmm.
like, I've just put all of this time and energy and now they didn't close, right? You might be disappointed, but it's not the same energy. And I think it keeps you in a really good authoritative place.
And then the next step is that 2 day intensive for roughly around $3,000.
The 2 day intensive, that also depends. So my 2 day intensive is $40,000 right now. A lot of my students, a 2 day intensive will be somewhere between 10 and 20. But, when they first come in, some people have been charging a lot less. Maybe their 2 day intensive starts at 3 or 4,000. We work our way up. I went from 3,000 to for a 1 day and 5,000 for a 2 day. 12 months later, I did so many of them, and then I started raising the price $1,000 every month. 12 months later, my 1 day was 10,000 and my 2 day was 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that was purely from just, I was getting tighter with the process. I was just getting better at it, and I was realizing we're building so many brands. I mean, you can imagine we were doing like multiples a week, that I just had a lot of referrals coming in, because every time you do a great job for somebody, well, everyone sees it, and then you get more clients. So.
And the primary deliverable after that 2-day intensive is not only really bringing their brand story strategy to life, but actually having a website. This must be a smallish website because you can only do so much in 2 days. Really, you only probably got 1 day to do it because you got to spend that first day of truly understanding the voice and how you're going to bring it to market.
Well, no, we do the whole thing ahead of time. So like we have built the entire brand and website and all the copy before we even start the 2 days.
Oh, so you've done that from just simply your 2-hour session.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interesting. So you get enough intel and you have enough experience and talent that in 2 hours you can define a brand, build out the website, and then you bring it to them and they look at what happens when they say, gee, Pia, that's not what we were thinking, or we don't agree. What do you do?
I literally haven't had that happen.
Yeah.
And the reason is because that first process is so clear. And because this small business market is, they're looking for that guidance. And because we have a really effective way of bringing them on board. So like our whole onboarding process on that 2-day intensive is very deliberately choreographed to bring the client along for the ride so that by the time they see stuff, they're like, yes, that's exactly what it is. And yeah, I mean, and I know from big agency perspective, you're like, that's impossible. Like we spend so much time on this, but I've literally trained hundreds of people to do this very effectively. So.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's keep going through your blueprint. So
Yeah.
you started with that client bit of how do you make them irresistible?
Then we go to intensives. Intensives involves everything from how do we make this happen? How do we shorten the client process? That's that 2-day intensive. How do we shorten the creative process? That's really a mindset thing for creatives who tend to spend however much time they have on projects because they don't necessarily have clear boundaries around how to do creative work within a time bound way. And then the third part is really about the model. So the model of your business, what price point does this need to be profitable? And I find a lot of small businesses are not thinking in terms of profit, they're thinking in terms of revenue. So I find a lot of our students will come in and then they'll use our freedom calculator and they'll plug in all their numbers and we'll find out that their biggest projects are their least profitable projects because as they increase the price, they increase the workload so much more. Or maybe they don't even increase the workload, the deliverables, they just work longer on it because they feel a sense of, I don't know, indebtedness, guilt, whatever it is. They just literally work more hours because they're getting paid more and they don't necessarily feel worthy of getting paid more for the same amount of time. I always try to explain to them, like, as you get more expert, things should take less time, not more time. But
exactly.
Right. That's a mindset shift that we work on over time. So that's intensives. And then once people get in the groove of using the lead product, selling intensives, and shrinking their process down so that it is profitable. And I define profitable in the small business world as you're making all of the revenue you need to pay for your life, your business, and your taxes in 50% of your client working time or less. So that's the benchmark. And so once they get to that place, you have 50% of your time available. I'm talking working hours, not all time, to then reinvest in building your authority machine. And that's the third part of it. So once you've freed up that time and you have the money, so you're not desperate and you're not just looking for clients, but you actually have your pipeline filled, that's when I think is a good time to reinvest in building an authority machine. Much like you have here with your podcast, and I'm sure all of the things that go along with nurturing people into the sale, the downloads and the email sequence and the, one-to-many marketing opportunities that bring people into your funnel so that they can build trust with you and get to know you. And when the time is right, hire you. So I teach that as a third thing. I think a lot of people go to that too quickly and they don't have enough time to do it properly. And then they just go back and forth. And that's why you see people posting on social media a lot and then disappearing because they don't have a solid business system yet for that to make sense. So that's the third part. And then that really allows you to just scale up.
So you not only are teaching these agencies how to use your process to attract and be more profitable with their own clients, but you also help them brand themselves, it sounds like. Being an authority machine to figure out what kind of agency they are for what kind of customer and what kind of industry, and to niche them down.
Yeah. And also what is their point of view and what is their unique voice and position in the market, and what do they have to say, or what is the way that they say it? And this goes back to your storytelling, right? How are they going to say it in a way that is going to resonate with their people uniquely? Because frankly, I'm training hundreds of people that all generally do the same thing. And yet I love that when new people come in, they go, I figured it would be a room full of all of my competitors, and it doesn't feel like that because everyone's really, there's a reason to go to each person. There's space for all of us here. And I really want everyone to hear that. Like, we're not in competition. There's so much business being passed, and this isn't right for me, but this is perfect for you. And, as small businesses, nobody, because I specifically work with people who don't really want a big team of employees, nobody here wants more than a couple handfuls of clients a year, right? They want to get paid really high prices for a handful of projects a year so they can live their life and enjoy what they do. And so obviously there's more than enough to go around.
Sounds great. Pia, how can people learn more about you, or where do they find you online?
Thanks for asking. Well, I mostly hang out on Instagram. My Instagram is @PiaLovesYourBiz. That's BIZ. But I also brought a little gift for your audience, if you don't mind. Yeah, I recently took the exclusive rights back from Amazon so I could put my Audible book on a feed and give it out, here and there to people that I like. And so I'd love to give it to your audience. If they want, you can go to nobsagencies.com/business of story, and they can grab the audio feed.
That is great. And / it's all one word, business of story. No spaces.
I do both because
okay.
Just in case.
That's smart. Yep. Okay, well, great. We'll definitely have that in the show notes. And thank you.
Amazing.
I appreciate that very much, that you would make that available to our listeners. And I know they'll appreciate it. I can't wait to listen to it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciated this conversation. And I love talking to other branding agencies, especially from the big agency world, which I don't know anything about.
Oh, no, it sounds like you've got it down, but you and I share the same belief that speed to market is so powerful in this day and age. The Achilles heel with it is to get it right.
Absolutely.
So many people will race to market with all the wrong stuff. In fact, I had a guy on, Sean Grace, a couple weeks ago, and he's come out with a book I think you would really like too, The Art of the Question. And it's asking questions, in collaboration or with clients or whatever to get to the right answers. But of course, the biggest challenge we have is getting the right answer to the wrong question that we've asked. And to first ask questions of yourself to understand your biases, your neuroses, if you've got them, your beliefs in a situation, to make sure that you are sitting across from that customer, client, colleague, whomever, and asking the right questions so that you arrive at that shared image of what you want together for tomorrow. And that's, I think, what you're doing, and you're doing it in a very rapid way, which is very cool. And I think the fact that you've got some guardrails on it and ways of doing it to keep it honest and authentic. Not that you're trying to pull the wool over, it's just to be accurate and authentic is probably a better way of saying that, authentic to that brand's voice.
100%. And I think that's why it's so important for people to continue to develop their listening skills and really hearing people. And to your point, asking good questions and then getting good at reflecting it back to make sure that you heard it. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do in any of these processes, or really in life, but certainly in the branding process. Yeah. So.
All right, Pia, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, how'd you like that show? Hope you loved it, actually. And if you did, please share it with anyone you know that needs to build a badass brand fast. And if you do me a huge favor and help me build my badass brand even more, please give us a rating and review over on iTunes. It really helps us get found in the noisy world we all compete in. If I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell, and I know I can because I've been doing it for thousands of people for the past decade, then shoot me a note over at park@businessofstory.com. And if you want to get going on building your more compelling, powerful, confident storytelling skills, then take our online course. It's a micro-training course. In under an hour, you will learn how to wield the ABT to make all of your messages land right the first time, every time. Check it out over at businessofstory.com/ABT. Thanks, Caden Howell, for editing our show, Darius Holbert for the fabulous music, and Marissa Hill for your continued support in building our community. I hope you're going to join us next Monday when Luke Peters shows you how to create an extraordinary exit from your business by getting your brand and operational story straight. You're going to love the show. Until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one excellent. Make it epic. Make it amazing. Live into it and have some fun. Thanks so much for listening.